All right, welcome everybody. Nice to see you for this, the 9th session of Grading for Equity. I'm Morgan Denton, you know me, and with that, I'm just going to get it rolling. I'm going to turn it over to our very capable hosts today, Beth Carlson, Renee Doucette, and Angela Domina. Thank you, and take it away.
So I'm going to present on chapter 13 today, and Angela is going to manage the sharing. So looking at this particular chapter, the driving principle was based on equitable grading distinguishes and connects the means. Oh, there's a picture over the words. The means for learning effectively, the soft skills, the practice, the mistakes from its ends, academic success, and utilizes the broad and diverse universe of feedback and consequences of which only one part is a grade. And I think that that's really important to think about, and I'm going to show you some examples of how I do that in my class. So next slide, Angela. So this is a quote that came from, it was actually taken out of a blog, not by Daniel Willingham, but I thought that it was incredible to think about, and I actually think about it quite a bit. Knowledge is the residue of thought. And I think if that's true, if you believe that, then getting kids to actually think about what they're thinking, that sort of metacognitive piece, is really, really important. And it's really important for them to be aware of whether they're self-regulating or not, getting them to create a community of feedback and reflection, and to be kind of keeping track of their progress and doing that themselves. I can do it, but they don't own it if I'm doing it. And I joke with my students all the time. I always say, I can lead you to the fountain of knowledge, but I can't waterboard you. You have to choose to drink. I can, however, give them a cup that enables them to scoop up the water. And I make myself available for conferences, for conversations. I call them to them. I'm there when they need them, all the time. I make it hard for them not to get the help that they need. And one of the things that I think is really important is to get them to reflect on the skills that lead to academic success. This article, and leading to academic success, Feldman talks about on 213. This article is something that I used with my kids in between semester 1 and semester 2 this year. An English teacher at our school shared it with the department, and the questions at the bottom are actually Renee's, the reflection questions. But this was a professor at McAllister College who teaches online classes, and she's just talking about what it means to be an effective online learner. The bold is my insert into this as I talk to my students. What does it mean for you to show up, and how would that help you when you are present to actually participate? So, you know, looking at number 2, when you get into a meeting, nod and look at the teacher in a synchronous class. That is the author's words. My addition to that is, please keep your camera on unless you're working independently. And telling them that it's really hard and frustrating to teach to a bunch of circles. And I shared how difficult it is for me in meetings to stay in the room if I don't have my camera on. And I actually shared something from a faculty meeting where I got distracted. And did it help with every student? Absolutely not. But I have several students who are now coming and keeping their cameras on. And if you scroll a little, Angela, the questions, after we went through this, the students read it, we talked about it, and then I asked them to do one of these things. Which components of sitting in the front row did you utilize well first semester? And what's one sit in the front row behavior that you want to try adding to your routine for semester 2? And we went around the room, the kids committed to that verbally, they had answered the questions and uploaded them to the Google Classroom. And we revisit that, you know, are you following through and committing to your activities? And I would say a large portion of the students actually are, or are owning the fact that they're not. Kennebunk High School has guiding principles that we fill in each quarter. These are based on the state's guiding principles, habits of mind. This is the document. I went through with my students at the beginning of this year, and actually it wasn't the beginning of this year, it was the beginning of second quarter. We actually did not think we had to do this. And then at the very end, right before the report cards were going to get sent out, they were like, oh yeah, you need to do that. So first quarter, I did exactly what I think is the most ridiculous thing in the world to do with these standards, which is just assign a score, a number to the student. These are things that I can't in any way affect change for unless the students are making their own change. So second quarter, I started the quarter by saying, let's look at these and let's adapt them to the hybrid format. So we added breakout groups, we added emails when necessary to explain a need or ask a question. For a self-directed and lifelong learner, stays on task and doesn't goof off, especially when online. Just getting the kids to sort of think through, how does this new format change the way you might have to think about what you do? Maybe what you do isn't what you've always done, needs to be changed up for this format. So navigates, I talked about this one, navigates between what is personally and externally meaningful when you're sitting home and there's something more interesting happening on another tab. Just putting it out there so the kids have a chance to think about the choices that they're making. So if you go back, Angela, I want to talk about some of the bullets on the main slide. So the bold items were added or deemed especially important for this year by me and my students, but I ask them to self-evaluate 2 times per quarter, once in the middle and once at the end. And then they give a score. I, for the most part, give them their score, unless I think they're being hard on themselves, and occasionally I need to go and say, dude, you're really off base, which happens once in a while. But most of the time, the kids are pretty perceptive about what they're doing and not doing, and they set goals. You know, we're not tracking the goals, whether they're achieving them, but they're thinking about their behaviors. So, okay, next slide. This was something, it's a blog I follow, and I thought that it was a good thought to ponder and think about in terms of what Feldman is saying. We only have space to store a fraction of what we encounter on a daily basis. The test for which information gets admitted into the halls of memory is how much attention we pay to that information. If we don't spend much time thinking about something, the brain deems it unlikely to matter and thus tends to wipe it from our memory. On the other hand, if we do spend time thinking about something, it's probably worth remembering, and thus begins the process of learning. So go ahead to the next slide there. So given that, like reading this blog and having that quote and thinking about, oh my gosh, how do I get the kids to really think about the things that they're doing? I left the Grading for Equity book group and immediately at the end of the summer went into a book group with Sarah Zerwin's Pointless, an English Teacher's Guide to Meaningful Grading. And I had kind of this epiphany, which I hoped was going to work for this year. And it actually has worked so well, I'm going to continue it kind of till the very end of my teaching career, probably, is Sarah Zerwin recommends that you have learning goals for your classes. What are some overarching skill sets, behaviors that you want to see kids do, and if they do them, they're going to be better. They're going to get better at those things, and that will improve their work in your class. The students choose 2 or 3 goals out of my list of 7 to focus on. Their journal is written in weekly. I've got samples here, but I'm going to let you guys go back and look at them because I don't want to take the time to read them if you want. I teach an international baccalaureate class, and these samples come from that. The rubric and the IB learning goals I put up are also from that class. And then at the end of the quarter, I don't look at the journals till the end of the quarter. I just assign them, remind the kids they're supposed to be writing in them, put it on the Google Classroom for homework. In conferences, students drive the conversation about their learning. I have a quick conference with everybody. I give them a last reflection, and they sort of score themselves on their rubric. They do score themselves on their rubric, and then I sit down with them and I celebrate, or I'm supportive about what they've learned. I look through their journals and make comments before the conference. Do you want to click on the learning goals, Angela?
On the next slide or the past one? Sorry.
No, up in the yellow bar here in this slide.
Oh yeah. Okay.
So for this class, I've got, these are just simply things that if you're doing these, you're going to be better at the class. And the first one really has nothing to do with the class. It's just that the students read a diverse range of fiction and nonfiction that reaches beyond what's assigned in class. This may include novels and nonfiction books, but they all got a subscription to the New York Times this year. I encourage them to read articles. We talked about how to access the Washington Post, long-form journalism, and then they write a reflection that connects the reading that they've been doing with their perspective. Maybe they can apply some of the skills from class, writer's craft or text type contributions to the genre, whatever. I just want them thinking and reading. The second one is really about craft, style, and content, and that's completely what we do in class. So they can use assignments for that one. The third is read to analyze, looking for ways that text persuades or moves the reader emotionally. Not that different from number 2, but just a kind of different angle. Number 4, students write and or practice and refine your oral analysis. The IB class has an oral analysis component to it, so that they practice, refine, and revise either their oral deliveries or their pieces of writing to hone the final product, and thinking about their interpretation and their own craft when they do that. 5 is fully using discussion opportunities, not to parrot things that were already said, but to extend that or bring in their own original thinking. And then 6 is just study habits. And I tell kids, if you've got good study habits, do not pick this one. If you have terrible study habits, pick this one and pay attention to it. And then the 7th is practicing self-reflection, self-evaluation, and metacognition beyond what is required for the journal. So that's really when we're doing something, thinking about, do I use this in other classes? Could I use this in other classes? How do I sort of integrate things that I'm learning in other ways? The feedback from the kids has been overwhelmingly positive. They said to have 2 or 3 things that they just spend a marking period thinking about and getting better on as they're doing their homework, it has been really important to them. And this is the rubric. So I know Feldman, if you scroll to the top, Angela, Feldman says to do it without grading. But we are in a school that grades, and it's a 1, 2, 3, 4, but kids were immediately asking, well, what's a 4? What's a 3? What's a 2? What's a 1? And how will you hold us account? What happens if we don't do it? So essentially a 4 is an A, a 3 is a B, a 2 is a C, and a 1 is a D. And it just, you know, kind of steps through the depth and sophistication of the reflection and also the thoroughness of it. So, and there's an example at the bottom row is an example of an end of the quarter reflection. The final quarter entry, oops.
Sorry.
Go back to that. The final quarter entry contains an insightful reflection, reflective summative that answers not only the questions posed, so I had put a couple of questions up for the quarter, but also answers what did I learn this quarter and how does this learning apply not only in English, but in other areas of my life. I wanted kids to see that English skills, Alberto, it really depends. I tell the kids, you know, you're in the B range. It's a soft and fuzzy grade. It's not a clear thing. If you did it well, I might give you a B+. Most of the time, I gave kids an A, a B, a C, or a D. The range is there, though, for the kid that maybe was a little bit uneven. Okay. The other thing that I have used successfully with students, and this came up in the last session in our breakout group, but is the 1 point rubric. And it's used in the project that I'm going to show. Yes, those grades do get put in their regular Power School grade entry as a percentage. The 1 point rubric is, I have used it for both writing and for projects. Well, and in English, even my projects tend to have a lot of writing, but the students use the 1 point rubric to plan, monitor, and assess their own understanding and performance. And it gives us a framework for them to track their strengths and weaknesses. It doesn't place boundaries on their success. The kid that wants to really stretch doesn't have sort of oh, I only have to do this much. It does take attention off the grade, and it creates flexibility without sacrificing clarity. This was a particular project where I asked, it was seniors, they're on grade level seniors, and the project was that they had to gather information, do some research, and present it to a specific audience for a specific purpose. We had been working on the rhetorical situation. And Ilona's zine, I had some kids that didn't want to do papers, and it didn't have to be a paper. But on some of these kids, I needed to know how to sort of set a bar for them. So these were students who made the rubric with me. And this is their sort of bar that they set for themselves. The zine will be a creative document that represents the voices of a marginalized community. It will showcase artists' lives and work, and in doing so, make an argument about the value of their voices. The organization will consist of a compilation of different works and writing from queer artists. Graphic elements will enhance the aesthetics of the work. The organization needs to be clear, and the layout and design should guide the reader through the zine. Annotations of each work will analyze the effect of each piece on the intended audience, LGBTQ+ readers and allies, and then assessing the effectiveness of the rhetorical situation and the production quality. Do you want to go to the other one? Yeah, I really had no idea, Patty, how to assess a zine. So I had to have the kids I mean, and you'll see this next one. She wanted to do, Zoe wanted to do a multi-genre product that used creative elements for, she really wanted to evoke emotion at an individual level and have information to create a document that represents the voice of one assault victim, as well as statistics about the impact of sexual assault on women. Each page will highlight different facets of the problem, personal and systemic. The pieces will come together to make an argument about the impact of sexual assault on both the individual and society. And her organization consists of a short story, poem, or monologue that will enable readers to see the problem through a victim's eyes and journey, as well as corresponding data showing the scope of the problem. The organization of this is clear and compelling in its ability to appeal to the reader both emotionally and logically. So she was really clear. She wanted those two things to be separate and have that kind of multi-genre effect. And then the next one happened to be an infographic. This student chose an infographic for his particular audience. And he wanted to demonstrate facts about medical marijuana in order to make an argument specifically about its usefulness. And you can see the one I had in my Google Drive actually had feedback on it when we had conferenced about his organization. And he had done a really good job with appealing color scheme, clear data, enhanced by graphics. But about 2/3 of the way through the infographic, he weirdly got introduced recreational use and sort of defending recreational use. And I'm like, this isn't about medical. So we had to talk and he had to go back and revise for that. But he ended up doing a great thing in the end. And all of this was when we met periodically while they were working on this. This was the document that I used to assess their work. So I think that's some examples of how in my class I try to involve the students. I try to give them lots of opportunities to own what they're doing and reflect on it and do some self-assessment. We do a lot of discussing about that. We do a lot of peer feedback too. But I think it's really important for students to understand that, honestly, I can give them all the information in the world, but they need to own it if they're going to learn it and get better at it. So that's my spiel. We're ready for breakout group.
So I'm just going to say this is a good time to start your videos, right? Because you'll definitely want to have those on when you head off to your breakout rooms. I'm going to
Key takeaways, but I just feel like I actually got actual real life goosebumps in my last session. It's just really exciting. And I just wanted to give an opportunity if anyone has something that they wanted to just shout out to this whole group before we kind of wrap up our last portion. I love hearing what other people are doing. Renee or Beth, feel free to jump in here as well.
I'm happy to jump in. So we just wanted to kind of give a little bit of a takeaway, just a snapshot of one thing from each of the chapters as we kind of close out and prepare for our last meeting. I think Morgan and Patty are going to talk a little bit more about that. But when we thought about the practices that motivate students and offer them hope, we tried to think of one thing from each of the chapters that resonated with us as presenters and through our conversations during our last meeting. And we thought that increasing clarity is a really important piece for motivating students and offering them hope, asking ourselves what's expected of the student and how do they demonstrate their learning. building a learning community, how do we give feedback and facilitate and empower students to have agency in their own learning, and then offering students ongoing chances to demonstrate their learning. How do we, give grace, build up, support, inspire as often as we can through our practices as teachers? And how can we encourage learning from mistakes and provide redos and retakes? We just, in my breakout group, had a really interesting conversation about building that community of feedback and the differences that teachers may experience in a math or a science class, for example, in comparison to working with students on theater or as writers of literary or rhetorical analysis. And sometimes that looks a little different in the discipline. So how can we kind of change that experience a little bit with some of our intentional practices that we build into our work?
Thank you, Renee.
Yeah.
So we want to go back to that for a final breakout session, and this one will be pretty short. We had planned for just a 10-minute check-in, and we'd hope everyone come back to that question of which one equitable grading practice are you interested in really focusing on trying in your own practice, in your own position, in your own place, and how might you plan for this in your school or in your classroom? And along with that, what else might you need to know? I heard a lot of people sort of crossing over like things that you want to look at more that anyone has presented throughout the whole study. And we just love to give people a chance to say, I'm going to focus on this. I want to learn more about this. So we will head into those breakout groups, Morgan, for just about 10 minutes to give everyone a chance.
Okay, here you go.
Thank you.
Welcome back.
Thank you. And thank you, everybody within those groups. Renee and Beth, I don't know that we have anything else other than a huge thank you for the level of engagement. I think maybe 10 minutes could have been longer that last session. We were just kind of rolling up our sleeves, right? But I'm glad for anyone who has any contributions here. Otherwise, I will just say thanks, and we can wrap it up and head it back to Morgan and Patty for the last section.
And I'd like to invite everybody to turn on your camera and unmute for a moment and just tell us, this was really a big risk to talk about our grading practices because for a lot of people it can feel very dangerous. And I deeply appreciate that you've taken this risk, that you've joined us for this study. It's also multiple disciplines, and we often don't do that. We often stay firmly in our silos. So I'm just going to ask for a few ideas about how this was for you, taking a risk with something that is actually very personal in a group of people maybe that you don't usually talk to. How did that go? Should we do more of that?
I would say yes, we should do more of that. I feel like having these conversations in our own schools where we know the people is actually harder than having this conversation with, it's in a way safe because we don't know necessarily the people that we're speaking with. And we're finding lots of things that are resonating, amongst us. So I think having these conversations, especially with mixed groups. So, the message is now to me that it's not just me in science, it's like across the board in different subject areas and different age levels. We're all kind of having the same thought process.
Woohoo, that's what we were reaching for. Yep, thank you.
I think
For me, the whole, sorry.
No, sorry.
I was just going to say, for me, the process has also felt pretty affirming in that I came into this. I mean, I was drawn to it, feeling like I could be doing this better, and in terms of assessment practices, over the scope of my work, I haven't had a ton of training on it. And so it's felt affirming to hear that from others, and then also to be able to hear what have people tried and what's working, but then more importantly for me from the book, what do the research show, and to help me feel even more confident that that shifting is actually essential. Shifting the practices is essential.
Excellent. Thank you. Michelle, you're going to jump in.
I think it's like awesome to just, even if I hear something that may not specifically apply to my literacy class in middle school, that I can take it and, you know, remake it or take a spin on it and still utilize it, you know, just do it a different way. So someone may say something that happens in math, but I can take it and do it in my literacy class in a different way. So I like to hear everybody's perspective, and the more diverse the better, because that's how you push yourself. And at first you'll go like, oh my God, I can't believe they said that. And then you go back and think when you're driving in the car, go, wow, that was really a great idea and I should try that. Let it settle in a little bit, you know?
Yep. Nothing like drive time for reflecting. Absolutely. Anyone else? Jonathan.
I'm over and over again, as I talked to some of the people on this screen, several of the people on this screen, I get to work with, which is a blessing and a really empowering thing. And I am reminded over and over and over again as I listen and talk about this book and with these folks that this is more fair. It is more just. Telling kids what they need to know, telling kids what's expected of them, helping them to do those things, removing the mystery and the confusion, and only having them look at their work compared to a real clear description of work or the work they did before is more fair than the other way. It's better for everybody, and it's way better for the kids who are not at the top of the pyramid of privilege. It is way, way better for them. And so now I got to figure out how to do it, right? Now it's time to figure out which pieces are the ones that belong to me. But it's nice to know that I'm not by myself trying to figure out how to do it either.
Exactly. Thank you. And we appreciate those sounds of spring in the background. Virtual wait time. You always gotta wonder. Well, I especially want to thank all of the brave educators who stepped up and leaned into this project and agreed to provide the learning from their point of view, and especially for bringing their own practices and their own experiences. I think that makes it so much better than even hearing from an author or someone imagining it in the abstract, to find out how someone has taken it from theory to practice. And I think that's absolutely critical to our continued learning. Now so some of you, I know this is your first time doing something like this with me. You need to know you're on my radar now. I know where to find you, right? I can come and get you. And so I'm sure I'll be asking you to help again as well. And so for someone who can attest to how I really do appreciate having you in my inner circle, if you will, I would like to turn this over to Patty to share some ideas about what we do next, where we go from here.
So what I wanted to just go with right here at the end is give you a quick overview of what happened to me when I started to read this book. When I started to read this book, I wanted to change everything right away, right then, and change my entire department and my whole school right then. And that's impossible. Mm-hmm. Lesson learned. been told many times that change takes time. But when you let that go, you're not going to change everybody, and you just start to focus on your own practice. That's what we're asking you to do. Yes, do we hope other people will change? Of course. But what we want you guys to do in this next several weeks is just choose one practice, as Renee and Beth and Angela asked us to think about in that last breakout. Choose one thing. The first thing I tried after I read that book was minimum grading. I tried, instead of putting that 0 in, I tried putting in a 50 or a 60, something. And I found that my kids that were reluctant to participate, who were failing, who were ignoring their grades, actually turned something in because then they thought they had a chance. So I saw evidence and I tracked that. I paid attention to those kids and what it did for them. The kids that I was concerned about, my developing learners, not my struggling learners, my developing learners. So we're asking you to just choose one practice. And I can tell you that it's weird when you start to make change like this because you're nervous about it because we've been doing things the same way for so long. So you try it, you pay attention, keep some notes, document it. I loved how last session Angela showed us the evidence that she tracked of the kids doing the retake with the quiz. Like, that was awesome. That was action research. Teacher tried something, collected evidence from the beginning to the end of the trial, and could see that the retakes were valuable for those kids. So that's what we're asking you to do, is choose one practice. Don't try to change everything. Don't try to change your neighbors. You want to change a neighbor, give them the book. Let them look at the history and the research that he poses in that book, and let them pick a practice that might work for them. But for you, choose one, do some action research in your class with your kids, track it, and see what that feels like. And you may find yourself going back and forth. I did the minimum grade and I was like, oh gosh, I can't give them 50. They really didn't do anything. So I put the 0 back in. And I changed my mind and I put the 50 back in, and I had to check out what it did to their grades. So be an action researcher in your own classroom. Try something and pay attention to what happens to certain kids. That's what we're asking you to do. We're asking you to think about how you grade and reflect on it and look at the evidence.
So we're going to bug you over the next few weeks to remind you to take the time, now that we've done this text study, we want you to take the time to do some of that action research and some of that reflecting. And in particular, take a look at and just think about systems. What does it take to change a system or to make something become systematic? When we get together again on April 1st, what we're trying to do is bring in all the people from the first round of study who had it all done before the school year started, bring them back now to reflect on what they've done, what they've been doing all year, some of the consequences they've seen of the decisions they've made. And so that's what we're going to concentrate on for that last session, is bringing together people maybe that you haven't spoken to before and that have been doing this, have been studying for a little while. I'm amused by some of what I'm seeing popping up in the chat right now, if you're not following along with that. So I'll be sending out messages to remind you with the folks, the alum from the first round as well, and just be thinking about what do we do next? Because I'm beginning to plan, say, the next 6 months. It's still a lot of uncertainty. What can I plan to do over the summer to provide support? What can I do to provide support during the next school year? And so that's something that is very much on my mind this time. So again, I want to thank all of you for coming here. I want to thank all of our fantastic presenters. Michelle?
Yeah, I have something to say really quick before everyone leaves. I don't know if you guys got the email or whatever about the Maine DOE's Rev pilot program for innovation. I'm in it. I am taking the innovation course, and I just want to challenge all of you, because when you ask Morgan, how do you change the system? this is what the main DOE's Rev program is all about, is changing that system. So what you do is you learn how to innovate, create a pilot. You can have up to $250,000 to enact that pilot. One of the things that I'm doing is in my pilot is I'm using student data in our district instead of just NWEA scores to change what we do as far as interventions and classes that students take based on student-centered data and not just looking at that NWEA score. So you can use what you've learned in this class with grading and equitable practices and put those in your pilot, and you can change the system, hopefully a little bit with this pilot project. So I want to just empower you guys that we have this awesome opportunity. You can go right to the Rev site and sign up. There's a little link saying, I'd like to be on the wait list for the class. I want to give you a heads up. You need to have at least one administrator take the class with you. It doesn't have to be at the same time. Like, I couldn't find anyone to take it with me, but they're taking it these next couple of weeks. So you definitely want to, I would preemptively get another staff member and an administrator, however many people you want to join. I did it on my own. It can be done, but it's a lot better to do it with a peer. So if anyone has any questions, you guys can email me. I was one of the presenters for this equity class, so you guys should have my email, or Morgan can get to whatever. I'll put it in the chat, but I highly suggest that you can make a huge change by doing something like that and feel empowered.
And if you are struggling at your own school with the grading stuff, pass that book around. Just pass it around. Get a book to your principal or vice principal or superintendent to get people who can change things at a different level to start to make change too. That's how I got Morgan to change, remember? I told her about the book. She bought her own, actually.
Yeah, and thank goodness. I mean, look what's happened since we had that conversation, right? And it all started last spring when we were talking about schools wanting to use pass-fail in the fourth quarter. And how do we rethink grades? That was the tipping point. Like, that was the opportunity.
Yeah. And now that we're asking the questions, we have to work on finding the solutions. We don't know all the answers. We haven't done this before, but we can try to figure them out, and we can keep working on trying to improve, to do the best we can for all of our students, not just the ones that like to learn.
Absolutely. It sounds like there are people that want to continue conversations, like you've made some connections. If by any chance you don't have somebody's contact, just send me an email and I will connect you at any point. I love introducing people across the state and connecting them. I think that's one of the silver linings from this whole situation, is that I'm seeing people come together as colleagues and peers in ways that they might not have before. All right, with that, it's still lovely and warm and feeling spring-like. So if anybody would love to run out, I personally am going to go for a quick walk before I join the author talk at 7 o'clock tonight. Right? You guys remember at 7 o'clock tonight, Monica Wood, great opportunity there to have a chat with her. And so thank you again, and I look forward to talking to you again in the future.
And thanks Renee and Beth and Angela for today and last week.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Let me throw the feedback into, I forgot, I totally forgot. I'm usually really good about it. Let me throw the feedback in. So those of you who
Somebody asked about the author talk, the MCELA, Maine Council of English Language Arts. has been doing author talks this last a month, January, February, March. This tonight they have Monica Wood, and I don't know, Renee, do you remember who the next person is for April? Or Morgan, do you
Oh,
remember?
it's like Gary
Rick
Lawless.
Wallace, because it's National Poetry Month, and we're gonna feature a poet.
Right. So, and I think Morgan's been putting that out in her emails as well. But you can find those on the MCELA website. Renee, what is it? You don't know? What?
You have to remember that there's a lot of people here who are not actually English teachers.
Right.
Yeah.
True.
mainela.org.
Thank you, Beth. Looked it up fast. That was fast.
I do a great deal of my teaching in English, though.
Okay.
So
Yes, good, Jonathan. That's great.
Another quick plug, if there's English teachers or just people interested in feedback, Renee is heading a book talk in April on a book called, is it Flash Feedback by Matt Johnson? And so that's really about changing your grading practice and really focusing on feedback and how do you do feedback in a way that works for you as a teacher to still have a life. Very important. So that's coming up too, and maybe Morgan could add that in the blast to this whole group, because it isn't just about feedback for English teachers, although it's some English teachers that'll be running this particular book.
But feedback works in any context. Great. I will add that in to the follow-up to this session. All right, folks. Excellent. Thank you so much. Always exciting. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.